Hey, Gabriot here with another Expert Monster Train Covenant 25 guide. This time we're going to be covering the end game. It's kind of the third part in a three-part series of early, mid, and end game tips, tricks, and otherwise guidelines that you can follow to hopefully improve that win rate and get those win streaks going. This is going to be shorter than the other ones because the rings are, there's only 2 rings in the end game. And also, I'm not going to go over specific serif elements just because I already have a pretty in-depth guide on serif and the waves that make up each of those. So I'll link that in the description as well. I got the links to the different timestamps and chapters. So without further ado, let's get into it here. So endgame, as I mentioned, it's rings/circles 7 through 8. It's a little shorter than the other sections for whatever reason, 2 versus 3. So, you're not going to have much time to really add many more cards to your deck at this point. Usually the only cards you're really adding is in the form of hellventing them. So, any real specific endgame serif answers that you need, it's time to hellvent them. Or if you don't hellvent in rings 7, there's always one guaranteed in 8. And it might be time to really think about getting, usually like if you're looking for a hellvent target, it's not usually a unit I would find, it's usually a spell. So try to get that, maybe you need a double stack or whatever you need, just try to get it on your, or even just Ember cost reduction, try to get it on your high value spell that you're looking to hellvent at the end there. In the case that you don't even have something in hellvent, if there's a cavern in ring 7, you might just need to hit that cavern up because it might be that Hail Mary type card or just something that you need, artifact card, something that needs, there's a lot of possibilities with the cavern events. I do plan on actually doing a kind of a breakdown video of all those as well at some point, but at the moment I don't have one of them. But either way, there's a lot of caverns that might save you. Like if say you don't have a way to kill the double gilded wings, maybe you just get like a pulley or something that can help you out there. And as I mentioned, there won't be any serif real specific things in this guide since I already have a guide that covers all of that. So ring 7, yeah, you definitely want to look ahead to your ring 8 map because you want to plan out what you're doing in ring 7 according to that. As I mentioned before, there's always going to be a hellvent. So if you have a good hellvent target that you think would be much better if you got some specific upgrade, try to get that upgrade ring 7, set it up for a nice hellvent in ring 8. The ring 7 trial is worth 400 gold, which is obviously a much bigger reward than any other trial, any other rings trial. But the thing is, I would say I have definitely lost way more runs by taking the trial when I shouldn't have, rather than just letting that 400 gold go. I think it's a trap a lot of the time. Very, very rarely is it like, oh, I really need that 400 gold to win at this point in the game. I gotta be honest, like that 400 gold is just gonna be, maybe an artifact and an extra upgrade. That's really all it really represents. It's not representing 2 artifacts. It's representing like maybe an artifact and a half worth of gold. So, don't take it if it's going to be something that screws you. And honestly, for a lot of deck compositions and a lot of just enemy mob compositions, you probably shouldn't take it. We'll get into that in a little bit here. And yeah, also you get your final pyre upgrade here, and when in doubt, take draw still applies here, especially if you have key cards that you need to take. But also think about if you're fighting. I said I wasn't going to mention specific serif things, but just to use a specific serif example. And again, I'm plugging the serif guide, check that out for all of the specific examples. But to use a specific example, like against Seraph the Chaste, you're going to be facing Pyrewings, and it might be the time just to take like an Ember upgrade here if you don't have a good way to, you know, counteract the Ember drain of that. And also, you know, pip upgrade can be viable too if whatever you know, for whatever reason you really need to set up on the top floor. Say you have that artifact that dazes the top floor when they enter it, and you're like relying on absolutely needing the top floor. Well, if that's the case, obviously take the pip upgrade at that point. So let's get into the specific ring 7 waves here. There's actually 5 compared to every other ring kind of has 4. So a little bit of weirdness there, and one of them, I'll get into it in a little bit here, but they're all 7 waves except for one. One is randomly 6 waves. Not sure what the deal there is. Anyway, though, Pyrewings, this one I would say typically is the easiest of them in my opinion. The only thing I would say is aggressive amulet can be a kind of a pain here because of the sweeping. Sometimes it's not a pain, sometimes it is. It really just depends on how squishy your backline is. Got to remember there's 3 of these, so if you don't foresee there's any way that you can sort of survive 30 damage to your backliners and you need those backliners, then you probably just shouldn't take aggressive. In the same sense, Seal of Aggression, it only adds actually, you know, so aggressive adds 6 damage, or actually it adds 8, so that's 12. Sorry, my math was off there. So 12 times 3, 36. So you gotta survive 36 damage to take aggressive amulet. Or at least survive 12 and be able to heal it back in some reasonable fashion. And then Seal of Aggression doesn't represent as much damage. It's 8 per Pyrewing, though that's still 8 times 3, you know, 24 or whatever that is. Got to factor in that you can survive that, but you also got to factor in that it's applying that Ember Strike twice, you know, so you're actually completely Ember Drained most likely if these guys are hitting you. So those can be some tough trials. Otherwise, though, this Mark of Invasion is pretty easy. You know, if you have to, you can just go in at the bottom floor. For whatever reason, you can't survive 15 or 20 damage. Hopefully you can survive that, but sometimes you can't. I will say, though, that that's literally the same damage that you would get from the Ring 1 and 2 Mark of Invasions that you'd have to survive there. So really the only thing this mark does differently is you know, if you kill them, they still do the damage. So it might represent a little more average damage to your frontliner, but especially just more damage to your pyre health. But really, Mark of Invasion shouldn't be too bad, as it usually isn't. And then Ancient Hate. You know, obviously Ancient Hate is always pretty specific to your deck, like how much it relies on actually hitting with spells. But I find even in a deck that does rely on hitting with spells, the Pyrewings isn't too bad. There's not a whole, like, it has the lowest amount of like Gilded Wings or otherwise like high damaging tanks, and then it has Light Wings in the back just a few times. Like, it's really not that threatening, and the boss comes in with no additional units, so really Ancient Hate is typically just not anything that's going to be tough. And then everything else is kind of middle of the road and highly dependent on your deck. As far as the bosses go, there's only 2 bosses. And, you know, I would say just almost in every single case, this is going to be the harder boss, this dude that does trample. You know, it takes a lot of hits for this guy to even get up to 26 damage. I wouldn't be surprised if this boss at some point gets a rework, because he's honestly the easiest boss in the game. I'm not even being like hyperbolic here. I don't think in my entire time of playing this game I've ever actually lost to this boss. I think his name's Living Armor, the revenge dude. It's like, I don't know what you have to do to lose to this boss, but yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It's just such an easy boss. But anyway, you know, if you're, neither boss is particularly hard, but just this is the only one that ever seems to kill me, is the dude with the trample, and for reasons that are pretty obvious. Like, it's like other bosses, when they kill your frontliner, it still takes them a few turns to chunk through everything else, but this guy will just cut through them like butter. But, you know, I don't know. I don't find other bosses particularly hard, but the Pyrewings version is particularly not hard because it has no other units that accompany it, which most of the other waves are going to have that. And that's really it. You know, that there's only 2 Gilded Wings. Gilded Wings are a real pain in the ass, so it's nice that there's only 2. I typically don't find the sweeper unit that hard. Sure, he'll Ember Drain you, but as long as you're not taking aggressive amulet, it's not like he represents that much damage. And other than that, there's not much hard going on in the Pyrewings. Now the Penitent is probably the laziest thing they've slapped together in the game. You'll notice here, past the wave 1, literally every wave is just the same exact composition, same exact positioning. It's annoying, I would say, in that it's not like the hardest one, but it is one that can be annoying because there's a Gilded Wing on every single floor. Also, you have to chunk through one of these dudes on every floor. Some decks are not going to have an issue with that. Some decks are, though. Like this, there can be a lot of these trials that make this into a real painful fight. Without trials, it's really an easy fight. So this is probably one that you might want to think about skipping trials on, and then you'll just save yourself a lot of pyre health. Either way, as long as you can have a way to kill the pyre, you can get pretty screwed if you don't have a way to reliably kill these purifiers, because that's going to really hurt your card draw and the amount of ember you can justify each turn, because you have to purge out those scourges or take 5 damage and then have them shuffle back into the deck. You have a pyre in the back of everything, or purifier, sorry, in the back of everything every single wave. If you let them through like wave after wave after wave and they all start stacking up on another, that can be enough to lose you the game. You're just not going to be able to find any of your cards, like if you're relying on scaling and whatnot. And as far as trials go, I only really marked the invasion one as easy because again, you can just put your units in the bottom if you really need to, although 13 damage is still a decent amount to take, but most likely there's just no real huge punish. And honestly, you might be inclined just to put your units in the bottom on this fight, the Penitent, especially if you got sweepers or spikes, because you want to kill these guys early if you can, and you don't want them shuffling those scourges in. As far as the tough ones, I put aggressive amulet just because, on top of making the purifiers actually do some damage now, 3 is really not that much of a threat, but if you're adding 8, now they're doing 11 damage, it's somewhat significant. It also makes these dudes actually do damage, and not just be some mindless meat shield. And then even more importantly, every single one of these Gilded Wings is now doing 18 damage. That's a lot of damage, and quite often you're not able to kill all these Gilded Wings depending on your deck makeup, and that's going to represent a lot of damage to your pyre. And Seal of Aggression's kind of the similar story. It's actually, in this particular fight, Seal of Aggression is easier than Aggressive Amulet, because the only minion here it actually gives extra damage to compared to Aggressive Amulet is the Gilded Wing. Makes them 20 versus 18. Granted, I still listed it as tough, because it's like, even though it doesn't give the frontliners any extra damage, it only gives the purifiers 3 extra damage. Overall, it's still the fact that there's so many Gilded Wings, the fact that they're all multi-striking, it's still kind of a pain, and it still represents a lot of damage to your pyre, most likely. And then Armor Emblem, on top of just, there being a lot of beefy units that it adds armor to, it also adds armor to a backliner that's already, as far as backliners go, pretty beefy at 10 HP. And then adding 20 armor to that is going to make it pretty much guaranteed, even with like a good sweeper, unless you have a really good scaling on your sweeper. Your upgraded vents, your upgraded glimmers, they're not going to be good enough to take it out now with the armor emblem. And that means you're getting all those, and even spikes or whatnot. Like, it just really limits how you're going to be able to kill those purifiers. And if you can't deal with all those scourges coming in, that's going to be pretty brutal. And then Heaven's Seal. Mainly the reason that I put Heaven's Seal as tough is because, just by the nature of having all these Gilded Wings, if you can't kill them all in one go, which is honestly pretty hard to do considering there's all these tanks in front of them each wave, they're going to come through, and anytime Heaven's Seal with this, anytime a Gilded Wing gets through with Heaven's Seal, you're taking a lot of pyre damage. Think about if you'd have 40 damage on your pyre or whatever, it has to basically apply 200, so 5 hits to kill the dude. He gets an initial hit in, so it's like that's 50 or 60 damage, and he'll come in at 190 health no matter what. And yeah, that sucks. Like, you can maybe survive letting one through. You let two or more survive, you're pretty much going to be dead. So Heaven Seal is pretty brutal. And I've so many times taken it when I shouldn't have, especially on the Penitent. And that's the Penitent, kind of lazy. Still no accompanying, and it's weird to me that the Purifier didn't accompany this boss. I feel like that could probably be justified, but oh well. It's a naked boss, not too bad. Now we got the Shadewings. I hate this one, honestly. It's very hard. That being said, if you got the right deck, it's not too bad. I guess one plus you got compared to the last wave is there's technically one less Gilded Wing, so that's a good thing. Other than that, though, I think the punishments are they're similar, just way worse here. I didn't put anything as easy here. Even like Mark of Invasion, it's like you can't go in at the bottom, most likely, unless you really got some beefy dude and some sort of early scaling that you find, or early AoE that you find. That's 70 damage at the bottom floor, wave 1, so you're pretty much relegated to moving in at the middle or top, and if you can't do that, you're pretty screwed. Either way, even if you come in fine, you're still taking like the 15 and then 20 damage from the Mark of Invasion. That's going to be a lot of damage to your frontliner, and that's a lot to ask to have to prepare for this 70 damage incoming. So I didn't say it was hard, but it certainly wasn't easy like it is with the other ones. As far as, one second here, as far as the tough go, there's a lot here. And honestly, you could even argue on this last one that Ancient Hate should be there, but especially for this one, Ancient Hate can be really rough, because even if you do have a deck that doesn't rely too much on spell damage, I would imagine you have at least some, and if you don't, boy, you're gonna have trouble with this one anyway. Because not being able to get to these Shadewings before they attack your front line is just going to be brutal. I mean, they have them on every wave, two of them on two of the waves, and then also two on the boss waves. If you can't kill them with your spells, that's rough. That's really rough. Hopefully you got like a sweeper with quick. If you got that, you can take Ancient Hate no problem, and you probably won't have a problem with this battle in general. But if you don't have that and you're relying on spell damage for AoE or otherwise backline removal, Ancient Hate is almost untakeable in this fight. Exceptions include like piercing thing. If you have like piercing damage, that could work too. Aggressive Amulet. Both Aggressive Amulet and Seal of Aggression represent a lot of extra damage in a fight that you're already taking a lot of damage in. So, if you don't have AoE, oh my god, do not take them. Because that's, in the case of Aggressive Amulet, that's going to make the dudes do, 40, because it adds 8, so it's 23, so 46 damage each. In the case of Seal of Aggression, it's 45 damage each, because it's just another stack of multi-strike. Either way, that, and then if two of them are doing it, it's like you're looking at 100 damage on some of these waves. That's pretty ridiculous if you can't take care of it, right? And even on the boss wave, like if you can't take care of that, you're going to be pretty screwed. Armor emblems, similar to Ancient Hate, it's like that's 20 extra armor. If most AoE spells aren't going to be able to deal with that, and even the AoE sweepers, if you don't have pretty good scaling on them, are not going to be able to deal with that. Armor emblem represents a lot of damage on your frontliner, and as well, if it means they're getting through to your pyre, you're not going to survive many pyre hits with the Shadewings getting through. And then Heaven Seal, similar to the last one, like there is one less Gilded Wing, sure, but there's still 4 of them. 4 Gilded Wings, still, even with Heaven Seal, that's enough for me to say that it's a tough trial. Still a lot of damage to your pyre. Pretty hard to kill everything, right? And that's the Shadewings, pretty tough one. Don't forget that the boss has 2 of these behind it. That can be pretty rough if you can't take care of them. And then the Winged Horde, this one I find somewhat similar to the last one, though I think I would prefer it to the last one. It's still kind of annoying. If you're to, it still represents a lot of damage to your frontliner and potentially Pyre, but usually I find that these are easier than Shadewings, and just in a general sense. Anyway, though, you find about the same, what do you call it? Like trials that I listed here. Like I still didn't think anything was particularly easy. You're gonna have a lot of potential Pyre health being taken if you do the invasion, but as far as these go, like not being able to kill with spells like the dudes on a lot of these turns is pretty rough, particularly wave 1. If you can't chunk through them with some spells, these 3 Wilt Wings in front of the Gilded Wing, this pretty much means a full health Gilded Wing getting on up to your Pyre, unless you have some good AoE to sweep them out first, or some spikes or something. It also means, on even some of these other ones, it's like if you can't kill the dudes in back with spells, and you can't kill them with sweeping, that means they very well may get up to the Pyre, and that represents a pretty good amount of damage the more and more these get through. Like, say there is a wave where all 3 get through, that's gonna be 30 damage to your Pyre, which isn't quite as bad as like a Heaven Seal Gilded Wing getting through, of course, but it's still 30 damage to your Pyre. It's the 15 initial that they do, then the 5 damage extinguish. It's not something to take lightly. And Armor Emblem is basically the same thing as Ancient Hate. It's like if you can't chunk through these guys, and the boss as well, remember they're in front of the boss here, so that's extra hits to chunk through. It probably doesn't matter with Living Armor since he's so easy, but with this dude, Trampler, could mean the difference between your frontliner just being able to not die or not, being able to get those extra free hits in. Armor Emblem and Ancient Hate can definitely represent some issues there. And then Aggressive and Seal of Aggression, they're not as bad as the last one, Shadewings, but it's still pretty bad. I mean, we do have more tanks in this one compared to Shadewings. You got these armor. These dudes are technically, outside of some specific scenarios, they're basically a Gilded Wing, except slightly worse. The armor will end up getting them about the same health if they're able to get those harvests, which usually they are. And then they do 1 more damage, so really the same unit as a Gilded Wing, just a little bit worse on average, I'd say. But anyway, adding them Aggressive and adding them Double Strike is certainly going to represent a lot of damage to your frontliner and the Pyre if they get through. And for the same thing with Heaven Seal, it's like, yeah, technically you can still kill the armor on these dudes, but still they're going to come back with 140 health and 11 damage, assuming that you are even able to clear the armor. But if you're able to clear the armor but not all the health, they're still going to come up with 11 and 140. That's still pretty brutal to your Pyre. Yep, that's pretty much the trials here. And then we get to the final wave of Ring 7 here, the weird one that apparently has no Wave 6, right? It's kind of weird to me. Not sure what the theme there is of why they didn't get a Wave 6, but it is what it is, I guess. It's Conduit Masters. They can be an issue, or they could not be an issue. I think it obviously just depends. I think they can be pretty tough. It is nice that they have 1 less wave, though, I guess. I did list Mark of Invasion as easy here, just because you could go in at the top, and that gives you still a pretty good amount of time. You're kind of, with this group, probably wanting to go in at the top most of the time. And it doesn't add like that much damage in, so it's kind of easy to take Mark Invasion. That's really the only easy one, though. Like Armor Emblem and Ancient Hate, what they really represent here is the making it hard to kill the multi-strike enhancer. So really, Ancient Hate in a lot of cases is essentially the same as Seal of Aggression. That's kind of one way I would think about it. Although it could potentially be worse given that the bosses get multi-strike with this dude. So like, you know, if you really don't think you can deal with the spell damage to reliably kill these enchanters in the back, I wouldn't take Ancient Hate here, because you really got to remember the boss gets it. Again, it's not so bad on Living Armor since he sucks, but the Trampler, that could be brutal to have him just left unchecked with multi-strike. Same goes for armor. Armor and Ancient Hate are really the same idea. It's like you have to really think, how reliably can you take care of a backline enchanter. Also remember that they're there every single turn. The one thing that's nice about this fight, though, is it's really not, you know, there is a Gilded Wing on each floor, which sucks, but only the first one really has anything beyond that has HP. You know, the wave one can suck here, but all these other waves, you only have to really, like a Wilt Wing isn't too hard to chunk through necessarily. It is with Armor Emblem and maybe Ancient Hate, but you know, compared to some of these other ones, like that seem to have just more, like Penitent especially, it's like it's really not as much HP to try to chunk through to get to those Gilded Wings. But anyway, aggressive and seal, really that just comes down to they're already multi-striking. Adding another multi-strike or adding more damage is just brutal. Don't let that happen. That's, you know, make a judgment call there. This one can just be absolutely brutal there. But you know, if you're high on damage, got a lot of AoE, and you can deal at least to your minions with some multi-strike might, and aggressive might not be too bad. And then Heaven Seal, same story as before, just these Gilded Wings. I really hate taking Heaven Seal as the final upgrade. I mean, I do it a lot, but it is just so risky. You know, again, any Gilded Wing that gets through is going to just deal so much damage to your Pyre. And yeah, that's the final one. Conduit Masters can be pretty tough. Really, it's just be happy if you get Pyrewings. That's really all it comes down to, I feel. Anyway, Ring 8. So, not going to go over the specific waves here like I did with that, just because I do that in my Seraph guide already. You know, just as far as the map goes, it's always going to be pretty consistent with what you get. You're going to get a Hellvent on one side and removal on the other. And I think the Pyre Health always goes with the removal as well. But and then one side will have a Merchant of Magic and the other side will have a Merchant of Steel. And in the middle, there's going to be an artifact shop that either side can always get. Now, you know, really think about what you need most. A lot of runs can be won or lost based on the choices you make on the map here. Got to remember, if you're looking for a specific like big upgrade, you know, like multi-strike or double stack, you know, things like that, the thing is in the third slot on each of those shops. Remember, there's always 4 possible things you can get there, and you can only reroll once. So you're looking at roughly a 50-50 to get any particular upgrade on that you're looking for. So, you know, if you really need that, factor that in. If you want to take a 50-50, or just if the Hellvent's like on the other side, you know, different than the shop that you're looking at there, maybe it might be good just to take the Hellvent if you know that the Hellvent's obviously guaranteed to get what you want. Only take that 50-50 if you think you need to win that 50-50 versus just taking the Hellvent, right? But when in doubt, Hellvent, because Hellvent is guaranteed value, obviously. Don't underestimate how powerful Hellvent is. You know, also, I've fallen victim to this lately too. I should have mentioned it here, but if you're really low on Pyre HP, don't go too hard to refill your Pyre HP. Unfortunately, any little mishap is going to represent a lot of damage to your Pyre against Seraph, usually. And the measly HP you get from that blood pool is probably not worth just taking the Hellvent if you need the Hellvent. I've made that mistake a lot of times. Hellvent's usually going to help you out more. And just final note here, check out the artifact shop usually before you buy anything or even take your Hellvent or whatnot. There's some artifacts that just change your entire decisions. Say you get like a split anvil, for example. Well, once you do that, you probably don't want to ember reduce some of your big cost cards. You also say you get like I don't know, like a extra spike damage artifact or something. Now you might be inclined to Hellvent like a spikes card to make spikes work or something like that. You know, just check that artifact shop before, because it can often allow you to set up the rest of the map better. Or you know, you'll have chosen your map side by then, but it'll allow you to like navigate the shop and the Hellvent or the removals better, right? Whatever you're end up looking to do there. And then final little bit here, just a quick note on each of the trials. You know, Heaven's Seal is going to be, in my opinion, always the toughest, just because there's always Gilded Wings on each of these. And I don't know, anyone that's done Heaven's Seal and seen a Gilded Wing get through just knows the pain that represents. That's just so much fire damage that it represents. So really only take Heaven's Seal if you really, really, really think you can take care of 190 HP tank plus, you know, a lot of times another extra 100 to 150 HP on top of that. Try to do that calculation. If you can't, you probably shouldn't take Heaven's Seal. Armor Emblem, it is probably hardest with the Shadewings, honestly. I mean, it pretty much makes it pretty hard to kill them before they hit you. And you need some serious HP or some serious damage shield or armor or whatnot on your frontliner to really survive that. But it's also, you know, it can make it hard to chunk through frontlining Wiltwings. It can make the Scourge Shuffler Purifiers be an absolute pain. And even the Multi-Strike Enchanter, if you can't kill him reliably, you've just now basically added a seal of aggression to them. And Seal of Aggression and Aggressive Amulet, you know, they actually kind of represent the same thing in most cases. I would actually say Aggressive Amulet, because the 8 damage is what it is, it can often be worse, especially with the sweepers, but essentially they represent the same thing. Just a lot of extra damage to your frontliner and then a lot of extra damage to the pyre if you can't kill them. Hopefully you got a beefy frontliner or good ways to mitigate damage if you want to take these trials on. And Ancient Hate, similar to Armor Emblem, and probably more so than Armor Emblem, Ancient Hate is very deck dependent. Like on some of those where I listed Ancient Hate is tough, if you have you know, I'm doing Awoken and Hellhorn runs. I find Ancient Hate is almost never tough to take because I just don't rely on spell damage to really do much in my decks a lot. So it really depends. You know, if you're just purely a scale up your units type deck, you really don't care about Ancient Hate at all. But don't underestimate it. Don't let those type of runs get you complacent on this one. When you get to another run, like particularly like I find like Umbra and whatnot, especially if you're like classic Umbra, you're kind of relying on generating morsels from like Entombra Assault or something like that. You really shouldn't take Ancient Hate because it's going to be what ends up losing you the run a lot of the time. Retribution, I had never listed on tough or easy, just because it really just comes down to one thing in my opinion. There's nothing any particular mob has that would make it harder or easier. Really, it just matters on your backliner. And if Retribution is like is your backliner important to winning the fight, and can they realistically survive that spikes damage? Like a lot of the times, like NM's to Will, for example, probably can't survive it. Or if you're really relying on using like a Hellhorn Tome and making a unit fragile, and you have no real way to, like if that's your only way to really clear things out, and you don't have like armor or damage shield or something you can put on them, Retribution is probably going to be a no-go for you there. But it really just depends on your deck mostly. All of these do, but this one, you know, I'd say Ancient Hate and Retribution more so than the rest. And then Mark of Invasion, I'd say of the marks, it's the toughest one just because it represents the most damage. Like with the other two marks, you can really just let them go by. and hit your pyre, and it doesn't really do much damage to your pyre. This mark, however, you often don't have that luxury. That does represent a pretty good amount of damage to your pyre just to let them go up there. Like, you know, if you let them go unchecked, that's 30 damage from the first wave and 40 from the next one, because they'll hit for 5, and then when they die, they do an additional 5. That's no joke. I mean, that's about half your pyre damage if you let all of them through. But, you know, all of that being said, it is generally easier than all the others, as the Mark of Invasions usually are. It doesn't necessarily represent a whole lot of damage even to your frontliners necessarily, though you can't really mitigate it as well. With the other ones, just a simple AoE will clear them out. With these, you know, let's say you got like spikes or something, the spikes will still mean that you're going to take 30 damage on that first wave, 40 on the other one if you can't clear them out, because remember, they hit you and then they also do the extinguish. So, I don't know, not too bad. And that's really all I got. Like I said, it's a shorter one. Check out the Seraph guide for getting those specific Seraph answers and whatnot. It's a pretty in-depth guide. I think it's one of the better ones I've ever made, so probably, you know, don't feel too bad plugging that one. As always, thanks for watching, and that kind of concludes this early, mid, and end game set of guides here. Probably the next one that's coming out, I'm working on a kind of the classic Hellhorned Awoken strategy. Just trying to string together a good win streak, I think, before I can sign off on making a guide for that. I have a pretty high win rate with it right now. I just really haven't been able to put together a good win streak. But yep, as always, thanks for watching. Until next time, peace.